The black between the stars was quiet. Too quiet. Far out beyond the reach of any planet's light, a shadow moved, so vast, it swallowed the glow of distant suns. It wasn't an asteroid. It wasn't a drifting hulk. It was alive in a way metal and steel shouldn't be. The hull gleamed faintly, edges catching what little starlight there was. It was a human warship, one of the old kind. The kind spoken of in frightened whispers across alien space. The ship had been running dark for days now, its engines barely pulsing. Inside, every surface hummed with quiet readiness. Weapons were primed, systems tuned to a razor's edge. Somewhere deep in its armored heart, the crew moved like predators in the dark, silent, tense, eyes fixed on the hunt. Across the void, its prey drifted unaware. An alien convoy heavy with cargo and guards who thought themselves safe. The escorts formed a protective shell, confident that no human ship could be lurking here, this far from the borders. They had been wrong before, but those were ancient tales, old space myths of humanity's last wars. Surely the humans had no reason to come this far. Surely. The warship's captain stood before the forward screen, watching the convoy's faint signatures. His expression didn't change, but the crew could feel it, the coiled tension, the quiet certainty that this was going to end one way only. Each breath was measured. Each order came in a voice low enough to keep the silence intact, as though speaking too loudly might alert the prey through the vacuum. This wasn't about random destruction. This wasn't even about vengeance. This was a message, one the galaxy had ignored for too long. Humanity did not forget. Outside, the cold vacuum wrapped itself around the warship like a shroud. The alien ships were still distant, still moving with that lazy confidence of those who believe they control the stars. Their drives flared occasionally, casting pale blue arcs into the dark. The human crew watched those flashes with the quiet patience of hunters who had learned long ago that the prey always makes the first mistake. In the crew bay, hands tightened around console grips. Fingers hovered over firing controls. The air was heavy, not with fear but with that strange calm before violence. Every crew member knew the stories. Entire fleets had scattered at the sight of a single human battleship. Armies had surrendered without firing a shot. Humanity's ships were not the largest, but they carried something more dangerous than size. They carried human resolve. Far in the void, the alien convoy shifted its formation slightly, adjusting for some distant gravitational pull. It was enough. The captain's eyes narrowed. Bring us in. No lights. No emissions. We get one pass. His voice was steady, quiet. Around him, the crew moved like shadows, switching systems to silent running. The hull temperature dropped. The ship itself seemed to vanish against the black. Closer now. The alien ships were growing, their faint outlines sharper against the starfield. One of their escorts made a lazy arc around the convoy, scanning half-heartedly. The humans held their breath. The warship passed into the shadow of a small asteroid field, using the rock to mask its approach. Inside the alien command vessel, no alarms had sounded yet. The officers were bored. Their sensors were picking up nothing unusual. The nearest human systems were light years away. It was routine, quiet work, until the stars shifted in a way they shouldn't have. On the human bridge, a faint chime sounded. Target lock. Every heartbeat in the crew bay seemed to sink in that instant. No one moved, yet the tension spiked so sharply it was almost a physical thing. The ship's massive cannons turned with an almost lazy precision, locking onto their marks. The captain didn't give the order yet. He waited, gaze fixed on the alien flagship. The prey still didn't know. They were still floating there, unaware that their death was measured in seconds. The first officer leaned closer. They won't see us until it's too late. That's the point, the captain said softly. The void seemed to hold its breath. The warship's reactor rumbled low, a predator's growl in the dark. Every system was awake now, waiting for the word. But the captain knew patience was the sharpest blade. A strike too early risked scattering the prey. A strike too late risked letting them call for help. Then it happened. One of the alien escorts began to turn toward the warship's hiding place. Its scanners swept wide, passing dangerously close to a lock-on detection. The captain's eyes flicked to the tactical display. The moment was here. Now. The void exploded. Light ripped through the darkness as human guns roared. The warship's forward batteries spat fire across the stars, the blast streaking toward the alien convoy. The first escort never had a chance. The beam cut through its shields and split the hull open like fragile glass. The shockwave lit up the alien fleet, their sensors suddenly screaming with alarms. In seconds, chaos bloomed. Alien ships spun in confusion, trying to scatter, trying to form a defense line. But the warship was already among them. Through the chaos, the crew's movements were quick, precise. No wasted shots. No missed chances. The alien flagship's shields flared and cracked under the bombardment. Debris spun through the dark like frozen sparks. And then, in the middle of the battle, a new signal appeared on the human scanners. A signal they weren't expecting. It wasn't alien. It was human. It was faint, damaged, but undeniably there, a distress beacon from a human vessel. One that shouldn't be anywhere near this part of the galaxy. One that was broadcasting on an emergency frequency not used in decades. The captain froze for just a heartbeat, eyes locked on the signal's coordinates. It was coming from beyond the convoy, past the tangle of alien ships. "Identify that source," he ordered sharply. "It's old," the comms officer said, scanning the readout. "Looks like military class. But the ID code, sir, this ship's been missing for 30 years. The battle raged outside, but the warship's crew felt the shift in the air. This wasn't just a hunt anymore. Something far stranger was unfolding in the void. The captain's jaw tightened. The prey was scattering. The aliens were still firing desperately, but his attention was already pulled toward that lonely, impossible signal. "Change course," he said. "We're going after it." The crew hesitated, torn between finishing the kill and following their captain's order. But they knew better than to question it. The warship's engines flared to life, and in the chaos of drifting wreckage, it broke away from the fight. The alien ships tried to pursue, but the warship's drives tore the distance apart. Behind them the convoy burned. Ahead, the signal pulsed like a heartbeat in the black. Whatever waited out there was older than this battle. Older than this hunt. And as the warship closed in, the signal grew stronger. Then just before they reached the coordinates, it stopped. Dead silence filled the void again. The captain stared into the darkness, the prey forgotten, the battle left unfinished. Somewhere out there, something was watching them. Something that had been waiting a very long time. The warship drifted in the dark, slowing to a crawl. No one spoke. The crew could feel it, the shift in the air, the way every console seemed to hum with a nervous edge. The faint distress signal that had pulled them away from the battle was gone now, as if it had never existed. Only the memory of its steady, ancient pulse remained. On the bridge, the captain stood motionless, eyes scanning the starfield on the forward display. "Run the sweep again," he said quietly. The comms officer's fingers moved fast, sensors combing the void in every direction. Static filled the speakers, a faint hiss like faraway wind. "Nothing," she said after a moment. "It's just gone." "Signals don't just vanish," the first officer muttered. "Not one that strong." "It was right there." "It was real," the captain said. "And it was human." His gaze didn't waver from the empty stretch of stars ahead. "Somebody sent it. Somebody wanted us to hear it." The crew exchanged uneasy glances. They had been trained to face enemy ships, ambushes, planetary sieges. But this was different. A distress call from a ship lost 3 decades ago, in a region of space no human vessel had any business being in, was something the manuals didn't prepare you for. The navigation officer's voice broke the silence. "Sir, the coordinates where it came from, they line up with a dead zone." The bridge grew stiller as if the void outside had seeped into the air. Dead zones were places even alien charts marked with warnings. Gravity distortions, sensor blackouts, unexplained vanishings. Entire fleets had disappeared in them without a trace. Nobody went in unless they were desperate or foolish. The captain's voice was calm. "Bring us closer. Slow approach. Shields full." The engines whispered to life, nudging the warship toward the point in the black where the beacon had been. The view ahead was empty, just another patch of stars, until you looked long enough. Then you noticed something wrong. A faint distortion, as if the light there bent ever so slightly, warping the stars into thin arcs. Down in the crew bay, the mood had shifted from the charged focus of battle to a tense, watchful quiet. People whispered in low voices. The younger crew kept glancing at the bulkheads, as if expecting to hear something tapping from the other side. One of the gunnery techs leaned toward his partner. "If that ship's been missing for 30 years, how's it still broadcasting? Systems that old should be dead a dozen times over." "Unless someone's keeping them alive," the other replied. The tech gave a humorless smile. "Or something." The warship crossed the edge of the distortion field. Instantly, the sensors began to flicker. The smooth readouts fractured into static bursts, contact points appearing and vanishing in seconds. The stars outside seemed to sway ever so slightly, as if the entire ship were looking through water. Power fluctuation on the forward array, the engineer reported from below decks. Recalibrating, but it's not us, sir. Spaces, he cut off, searching for the word. Wrong. The captain didn't look away from the display. Keep us steady. If it gets worse, pull us back, but not before we know what's in there. Minutes passed like hours. The deeper they moved into the distortion, the stranger everything felt. The comm systems caught faint fragments of sound, not the clear ping of a distress beacon, but whispers, static patterns that almost sounded like voices if you listened too long. Then the visual feed picked up something. At first it looked like a drifting piece of debris, jagged metal silhouetted against the stars. But as they drew closer, the shape grew, resolving into a hull. It was old. Scarred. The plating was patched with mismatched alloys, some clearly not human in origin. The ship floated motionless, a ghost in the dark. The first officer's voice was low. That's not one of ours. Not completely. No, the captain said. But it was. The old military markings were still faintly visible beneath layers of alien repair work. The nameplate was scorched, but enough letters remained to make it unmistakable. This was the missing vessel. The one lost decades ago. It had been found, rebuilt, but not by human hands. The crew stared at the sight. It wasn't just the repairs that made the ship look wrong. It was the way the hull seemed to twist slightly, as if the repairs had been made by someone who didn't fully understand how human ships were meant to look. The proportions were off in subtle ways, doors too narrow or too wide, hull plates overlapping at strange angles. The comms officer whispered, "No power readings. No life signs." The captain studied it for a long moment. "Launch a probe. I want a full scan." The probe slipped silently from the warship's bay, its thrusters nudging it toward the drifting vessel. Data streamed in, low-energy traces, scattered radiation pockets, structural damage consistent with a massive battle. No signs of recent engine use. And yet, the beacon they had heard had been strong and clean, like it had been sent from a functioning transmitter. The first officer frowned. If the ship's dead, where'd the signal come from? The probe's camera feed rolled past a breach in the hull. Inside, the corridors were dark and choked with drifting debris. A shattered console floated past, its screen long gone. A crew helmet spun slowly in the zero-G. Then the feed flickered. Static washed over the display. For a brief second, the probe's audio picked up something faint, a human voice, distant and distorted, repeating a single word they couldn't quite make out. The comms officer tried to clean the signal, but the moment was gone. The captain's expression hardened. "Bring us closer. I want docking protocols ready." The crew shifted uncomfortably. Boarding a derelict, especially one with this much wrong with it, was the sort of thing that only ever ended badly in old spacer tales. But orders were orders. As the warship approached, the distortion in space seemed to thicken, like an invisible fog pressing against the hull. The lights on the bridge dimmed for a heartbeat before stabilizing again. Down in engineering, the chief reported minor fluctuations in the reactor's output. Nothing critical yet, but strange all the same. When they were finally alongside, the view through the forward glass made everyone fall silent. Up close, the alien repairs were even more unsettling. The materials were smooth, almost organic in some places, as if grown rather than built. The captain stood still for a long time before speaking. "We're going in." The boarding team moved to suit up. No one joked. No one tried to lighten the mood. This wasn't a routine inspection. This felt like stepping into something ancient and patient, something that had been waiting. The airlock cycled with a slow, mechanical sigh. One by one, the team stepped into the connecting tunnel, boots clanging softly on the magnetic floor. Beyond the breach in the derelict's hull, the darkness was complete. Their helmet lamps cut narrow cones through the void, catching glimpses of floating debris and walls that didn't seem quite straight. The first steps inside were quiet, except for the faint sound of breathing over comms. They passed the twisted remains of a bulkhead, the scorch marks black against the old human steel. Ahead, the corridor split, one path blocked by fallen plating, the other stretching deeper into the ship's shadowed heart. The captain's voice came over the channel. "Stay together. And keep your comms open." Somewhere deep inside the derelict, a faint sound echoed. It wasn't mechanical. It wasn't the creak of metal under stress. It was something else. Something that sounded like footsteps. The boarding team froze. The sound came again, slow, deliberate steps echoing faintly through the empty corridors. In zero-G, nothing should have sounded like that. Every creak of the derelict, every shift of drifting debris was soft, weightless. But this was different. This had weight. The team leader's hand tightened on his rifle. "Movement ahead," he whispered over the comms, though the sound was barely more than breath. Their helmet lamps swept the shadows, the beams trembling just slightly with the pulse of their own heartbeats. The walls ahead curved strangely, patched with alien metal that shimmered faintly when the light hit it. The air, or whatever passed for air here, felt colder, heavier. The captain's voice came over the channel, steady but low. "Stay focused. Confirm the source before you engage." They advanced one step at a time, boots clinking against the magnetic grip of the floor. Every sound they made felt too loud. The corridor seemed to close in around them as though the ship itself was watching. Then a shape moved at the edge of the light. It was quick, just a flicker of motion before it vanished into the dark. A shadow against shadows, impossible to track. The team leader's voice sharpened. Visual contact. One target. Unknown. Back on the warship's bridge, the crew watched the live feed with growing tension. The distortion in the signal made the image jitter, freezing for fractions of a second before catching up. The captain leaned forward, eyes locked on the display. The team reached a bulkhead door, half human design, half alien graft. The opening was wide enough to slip through, but the edges were uneven, jagged in places. The darkness beyond seemed deeper, as if the helmet lights couldn't quite reach it. The sound of the footsteps came again. Closer now. One of the younger crew in the boarding party swallowed hard. "It's coming this way." The team leader raised a hand, signaling everyone to hold position. The breathing in their helmets grew louder, sharper. For a moment no one moved. Then a faint, metallic scrape echoed down the corridor ahead, followed by a low, almost human sound, something between a sigh and a whisper. Every muscle in the team's bodies tensed at once. The first officer's voice cut in from the bridge. "We're picking up a weak power spike near your position. It's not the ship's core. It's something else." The captain didn't take his eyes off the feed. "Find it? Whatever's making that signal, it's why we're here." The team moved into the dark chamber beyond the bulkhead. The walls were lined with strange, half-finished machinery, some human, some alien, and some unrecognizable altogether. A shattered console flickered weakly in one corner, its screen bleeding static. And there, at the center of the room, stood a single terminal, powered, active. Its surface glowed with the faint green light of an old human interface, the kind that hadn't been seen in decades. The screen displayed a looping message. "Stand by. Transmission in progress, asterisk asterisk." The team leader stepped closer, gloved fingers brushing the console's edge. "This is it. This is where the beacon came from." But as they watched, the message shifted. The letters began to distort, breaking apart into symbols no one recognized. The green glow deepened to a sickly, shifting hue. The power spike on the bridge readings climbed sharply. "Sir," the comms officer said urgently, "something's transmitting again. Stronger this time. Not just a distress call, this is a data burst and it's going out in every direction." The captain's jaw tightened. "Shut it down. Now." The team leader reached for the controls, but the console flickered and went dark, then came alive again, this time with an image. It was a human face. The feed was grainy, distorted, but unmistakably human. The man looked older, his uniform torn and stained, his expression a mix of exhaustion and something darker. His lips moved, but no sound came at first, only static. Then faintly the words pushed through. "Don't follow it." The image froze, then dissolved into static. The lights in the chamber dimmed, flickered, then steadied again, but the air felt different now. Heavier. And the footsteps in the corridor outside had stopped. For a moment no one moved. Every helmet camera was fixed on the dark opening behind them. Then something stepped into the light. It wasn't alien. Not exactly. It wasn't human either. It was taller than any of them, wearing what might once have been a human EVA suit, but the plating was wrong, the joints bent at strange angles. The helmet's faceplate was dark, hiding whatever was inside. Its movements were slow, deliberate, each step landing with a metallic thud that echoed through the chamber. The boarding team raised their weapons, but the thing didn't stop. It crossed the room until it was only a few meters away, the faint light from the console reflecting off the scratches in its armor. Back on the bridge, the crew leaned in toward the display, the tension in the room coiled so tight it was almost painful. The captain spoke into the comms, his voice low and even. "Hold your fire. Let's see what it does." The figure tilted its head slightly as if studying them. Then, without warning, it lifted one arm, and the console behind the team flared to life again. The green glow burned brighter, flooding the chamber with light. The distortion in the ship's sensors spiked off the charts. Every system on the warship flickered, Lights dimming, displays freezing, alarms chirping only to cut out again. The figure's helmet turned toward the console, then back to the humans. Slowly it reached up and touched its faceplate. The glass began to clear. Inside something moved. The team leader's breath caught. The captain leaned forward, eyes locked on the feed. And then, before they could see, every camera in the boarding party went black. The screens on the bridge went dead, leaving the crew staring at their own reflections in the black glass. For a heartbeat there was nothing. No feed, no audio, not even static. Then the ship's internal lights dimmed. One by one the consoles flickered back to life, but not with normal readouts. Instead, streams of alien symbols cascaded across the displays, pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. The comm system hissed with a faint, rhythmic static. "Re-establish the feed," the captain ordered, voice sharp. "We can't," the comms officer said, fingers flying across controls. "The boarding party suits aren't responding. It's like their systems have been overridden remotely." The first officer glanced at the captain. "Sir, we've lost more than just their cameras. We've lost them. No biosigns. No tracking. Nothing." The warship's sensors suddenly picked up movement, not from the derelict but from outside. Multiple contacts closing fast. The tactical officer's voice was tight. "Unidentified ships inbound. No known signature match. They're large. Heavy armament. Sir, we're looking at war-class tonnage." The captain's eyes narrowed. "Battle stations. Shields at maximum. Bring the main guns online." The bridge came alive with the sound of systems powering up, the low hum of the reactor feeding the warship's massive weapons. On the display the incoming ships grew larger, their outlines sharp against the distortion field. They weren't alien designs the crew recognized, but they weren't entirely foreign either. The hull shapes carried the hard lines of human engineering, but stretched and twisted, reinforced with alien alloys. It was as if someone had taken human warships and rebuilt them for a different kind of war entirely. The first officer stared at the scans. Those are ours." Or they were. "Sir, those are old Earth Navy hulls." The captain didn't look away from the forward screen. "Not anymore." The incoming fleet tightened formation. Their drives burned cold and efficient, no wasted motion. Whoever commanded them knew how humans fought, down to the smallest detail. "Sir, they're locking weapons," the tactical officer said. "And they're not warning us off." The crew braced. The warship's targeting systems tracked each hostile vessel, cannons ready. But there was something wrong. The enemy ships weren't coming in from deep space. They were coming from the distortion zone itself, as if they had been waiting there all along. On the bridge the comm system crackled once, just once, and a voice spoke. It was human. It was cold. And it was unmistakably a command. "Stand down. You're in restricted space." The captain's voice was steady. "Identify yourself." Silence, then the voice returned, quieter but heavier, like it carried the weight of something ancient. "You've been warned, Captain. Leave the derelict. Leave the sector. Or we will finish what was started 30 years ago." The crew exchanged quick, uneasy glances. 30 years. The same number of years since the ship they had found had gone missing. The first officer leaned in. "Sir, they know exactly who we are. And if they're flying those hulls..." "They were human once," the captain finished. His eyes locked on the incoming fleet. "And they're still using human war tactics. Which means they're going to try to flank before they close range." He was right. The hostile formation split, half moving to encircle the warship, the rest staying in front to block retreat. The captain gave the order for evasive maneuvers, but the distortion field fought them. The engines strained, navigation readings twisted, space itself pulling in strange directions. Suddenly, a proximity alarm screamed. A ship had appeared almost point-blank off their port side, slipping into existence without a warp signature. It fired instantly, brilliant beams slamming against the warship's shields, making the hull tremble. "Shields holding but barely," the tactical officer shouted. The captain's voice cut through the chaos. "Return fire." The warship's forward cannons lit up the void, the shock of the blast rolling through the distortion. One of the enemy ships spun away, burning, but the others closed in, their weapons hammering at the human vessel's defenses. And then the derelict moved. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the old, twisted hull began to rotate. Its alien-grown plating shimmered faintly, like something waking from a long sleep. A low vibration rolled through the distortion field, powerful enough to make every console on the bridge buzz. The tactical officer's eyes widened. "Sir, it's powering up. That ship, it has weapons online." "Impossible," the first officer said. It was dead when we... The words died as the derelict fired. A single beam of light, bright and unnatural, cut through the void and tore one of the enemy warships apart in an instant. The wreck spun, burning silently, debris scattering like embers in the dark. Every hostile vessel immediately broke formation, not retreating but shifting to form a defensive ring around the derelict. They're protecting it, the captain said under his breath. They're not here for us, they're here for that ship. The comms crackled again. The same cold human voice spoke, but now it was laced with urgency. Captain, you have no idea what you've walked into. That ship isn't a relic. It's a weapon. One we buried here for a reason. The derelict fired again, and the distortion field surged like a storm, swallowing sensor readings and bending the stars. On the bridge, alarms blared. The warship systems were being hit with an overload of data, codes, signals, encrypted bursts that weren't coming from any ship, but from the distortion itself. In the crew bay, people gripped their harnesses, eyes wide. Every instinct screamed that they were standing at the edge of something they weren't meant to see. The captain's gaze was locked on the derelict, its twisted hull glowing now with a pale light from within. He didn't know if the boarding party was alive, if they were trapped inside that thing, or if they had become part of it. But he did know one thing. If the enemy was this desperate to keep it here, then whatever was waking up inside the derelict was dangerous enough to start a war the galaxy wouldn't survive. The captain gripped the edge of the command console so hard his knuckles whitened. The derelict's glow was spreading, light crawling through the seams of its alien plating like fire through cracks in old wood. Each pulse of brightness sent ripples through the distortion field, warping the stars and rattling the warship's hull. Engineering, keep those shields up, he barked, even as another blast from the enemy fleet slammed against them. The tactical display showed red lines bleeding across their defensive perimeter, shields at half, reactor heat rising fast. The hostile ships were closing in, forming a wall between the warship and open space. They weren't trying to destroy the human vessel outright, they were hurting it, forcing it closer to the derelict. They're trying to get us in range, the first officer said grimly. In range of what? The captain demanded. Before anyone could answer, the derelict's central hull split open. Not in an explosion but like a massive door peeling back. From inside came a shape, long, angular, and unmistakably built for war. It was another ship, smaller than the derelict but sleek and deadly, sliding free from its ancient cradle. The tactical officer stared. Sir, that's a human warship design. From the first contact wars. But it's been changed. The new vessel's hull was dark, almost black, with faint streaks of silver and gold that shimmered like liquid metal. Alien graphs covered its surface, and its weapon arrays were nothing like anything in human records. The comms crackled again, the cold human voice cutting through the chaos. That's the prototype. The one they took from us. If it leaves this sector, the war we fought 30 years ago will start again. And it won't end the same way. The prototype's engines flared to life, and for a moment, the distortion field intensified so sharply that every star in view stretched and bent like light through shattered glass. The captain made his decision. Target the prototype. Full power to forward batteries. But sir. Now. The warship's cannons fired in unison, brilliant lances of energy cutting through the void. The first shot slammed into the prototype's shields, flaring bright. The second punched through, tearing a molten scar down its side. But the prototype answered. A beam unlike any the crew had ever seen lanced out, not bright, but so sharp it seemed to cut the darkness itself. It tore across the warship's shields, dropping them to a flicker in seconds. Consoles exploded in showers of sparks, the bridge plunging into partial darkness. Shields failing, the tactical officer shouted. The captain's mind raced. They couldn't outgun it. They couldn't outrun it. But the distortion field, it was unstable, tied to the derelict itself. If they could overload it, maybe they could collapse it, take the prototype with it. Engineering, he said, prepare to dump the reactor's full output into the distortion. I want it focused on the derelict's core. That'll burn us out, sir, the engineer warned. Best case we lose main power. Worst case. I know the worst case, the captain cut in. Do it. On the bridge, the crew moved with grim focus. The warship swung around, putting the derelict dead center in its targeting reticle. The enemy fleet tried to close the gap, but the captain drove them back with concentrated fire, ignoring the damage reports scrolling across his vision. Reactor at critical output, engineering confirmed. On your mark. The captain locked eyes with the first officer. Mark. The warship roared as its core dumped everything it had into a single searing blast aimed straight at the derelict's glowing heart. The beam hit, and for a moment nothing happened. Then the light within the derelict flared so bright it washed out every sensor reading. The distortion field buckled. Space twisted violently, pulling at every ship within range. The enemy fleet broke formation, engines flaring hard as they tried to escape the collapse. The prototype fought to break free, but the warping gravity dragged it back toward the derelict, its sleek hull groaning under the strain. The warship itself began to shake apart, alarms wailing as the collapsing field pulled at it from all sides. Bulkheads groaned, lights flickered, and crew members clung to anything bolted down. Through it all, the captain watched the prototype, saw it pulled closer, saw its alien plating crack, saw its engine sputter. And then, with a soundless explosion of light, the derelict imploded. Everything caught in the collapse. The prototype, the enemy ships, the distortion itself, vanished into a single point before winking out entirely. The void was silent again. The stars hung steady. The warship drifted, systems failing one by one. Reactor offline, engineering reported weakly. We're running on backups. The crew let out shaky breaths, the tension breaking like a dam. They had survived. The prototype was gone. The enemy fleet was gone. Then the comms crackled. Not static. Not the cold human voice. This time, it was the voice from the console inside the derelict, the one they had seen before, grainy and tired. You didn't stop it, the man said, his voice low and calm. You only moved it. The bridge went silent. The first officer swallowed hard. Moved it where? The comms went dead again. And out in the void, far beyond their sensors, something pulsed once, faint, steady like a heartbeat. The silence after the battle felt heavier than the noise of war. The stars outside drifted in their quiet paths, untouched by the chaos that had just unfolded. Inside the warship, the crew sat still for a long moment, letting the reality sink in. The conflict was over. The enemy had fallen back, their ships scattering into the endless dark, leaving nothing but trails of light that faded into the void. No one cheered. There was no celebration. The cost had been too high for that. The names of those lost hung unspoken in the air, written on every face. Even in victory, war never left you whole. It carved pieces out of you, pieces you never got back. The ship itself bore the marks of the fight, scorched plating, flickering lights, the hum of systems running on emergency backups. The great vessel that had hunted its prey through the stars had survived, but only just. Repairs would take weeks, maybe months. And yet, there was a strange stillness in the damage. A quiet pride. The ship had done what it was built to do. Around him, the crew moved slowly, speaking in low voices, their eyes tired but steady. They had all seen death tonight, and they had all chosen to keep going anyway. That was the thing about humanity, no matter the fear, no matter the odds, they endured. And in that endurance they found their strength. He thought about the enemy commander, the one whose ship had been at the center of this chase. Somewhere out there, that commander was still alive, retreating into the black. The war wasn't over, not really. This battle was just one chapter in a longer fight. And maybe, just maybe, the enemy would remember this night. Remember that a human warship had hunted them across the void, had found them, and had not stopped until they were broken. The medbay reports came in, injuries, burns, concussions. And the dead. He listened to each one, giving no orders, just absorbing the truth. Leadership wasn't about issuing commands after the fight. It was about standing in the silence afterward, carrying the weight of every life lost. When the final report ended, he walked the length of the bridge, his boots echoing on the metal floor. He looked at each of his crew in turn, not as a commander, but as another human who had stood beside them in the storm. We go home, he said finally, his voice low but steady, and we carry them with us. The ship turned slowly, engines rumbling to life as they set a course back to the nearest human outpost. Stars shifted across the view screens, the void stretching endless and cold. Somewhere out there, the war would burn again. But for now, there was a fragile peace in the dark. He knew the galaxy would never forget what had happened here. The message would spread, humanity did not run. Humanity did not bow. Even in the emptiness between stars, they fought for each other. And that was something no enemy could erase. As the hours passed, he walked the ship, visiting the crew in their stations. In engineering, they worked with quiet focus, sealing hull breaches, coaxing damaged systems back to life. In the mess hall, a few sat together in silence, sharing what little food they could keep down after the fight. In the medbay, the wounded rested while medics moved like ghosts between beds. Everywhere he went, there was the same look in their eyes, exhaustion, grief, and something else. Determination. The kind that only came from knowing they had faced the worst and still stood. He found himself thinking about home, about Earth, about the cities under blue skies, about the smell of rain and the sound of waves. Out here in the cold dark, those memories felt almost unreal. But they were why they fought. Not for territory, not for pride, but for the fragile, beautiful things that could only exist in the warmth of sunlight. By the time they reached the edge of human space, the ship was holding together better. Repairs had stabilized the hull, and the life support systems ran at full strength again. The crew had begun to speak a little louder, move a little faster. The war was still far from over, but surviving this battle had given them a reason to believe they could survive the next. The message from command came through as they entered the outer defense perimeter. It was brief, confirmation of victory, acknowledgement of their success, and a reminder that the war front was shifting again. He read it twice, then deleted it. The official words didn't matter. The only truth was here, in the people who had lived through the void's terror and come back alive. When they docked, the silence was broken by the sound of hatches opening, of boots meeting solid ground. The air of the station felt heavy with oxygen after the recycled sterility of the ship. People were waiting, medical teams, engineers, officials. But before any of that, the crew stepped off together, side by side. He stayed back for a moment, letting them go ahead. Watching them walk onto solid ground felt like watching the sun rise after a long night. They deserved this moment, however small. Later, when the ship was empty and quiet, he returned to the bridge. Outside, the stars glittered, distant and cold. Somewhere out there, war waited. But for now there was this stillness. He let himself breathe it in. War in the void was never truly over. But neither was humanity's will to endure it. And if the galaxy had learned anything tonight, it was this. When humanity hunted, they hunted until the end. And when they came back from the hunt, they carried the memory of every star, every loss, every heartbeat into the next fight. That was their strength. That was why they would never fall.